si quieren escuchar el webinar en español o lo quieren escuchar en inglés, tenemos interpretación simultánea. Y el webinar de hoy va a tener un espacio para preguntas y respuestas. Queremos también hacer de este un espacio y una conversación. Entonces, pues, bienvenidos. Quiero presentarles a quienes no lo conocen directamente al doctor Ben-Shahar. Él es líder mundial en estudios de la felicidad, en psicología positiva, liderazgo organizacional. Fue maestro del curso más popular en la historia de la Universidad de Harvard y actualmente fue el que creó la maestría a través de Centenary University en New Jersey, en la que estamos abriendo la segunda generación, está iniciando ahorita. Y bueno, es una grandísima persona. He tenido el placer de trabajar con él por más de 10 años y de verdad es un honor seguir a su lado, creciendo y aprendiendo y compartiendo pues estos programas maravillosos alrededor del mundo. Tal ha escrito numerosos bestsellers que están traducidos a muchos idiomas distintos y realmente es uno de los más grandes líderes a nivel mundial en estos temas. It's such a pleasure, Tal, to have you here with us. Welcome and thank you so much for being part of the EB family as well.
Thank you, Arlen. I'm delighted to be here.
Voy a estar hablando ya en inglés para poder tener esta conversación. So we chose to speak today about happiness myths. And we know that research has shown that when we try to search directly for happiness, when happiness is our goal, usually our levels of happiness decreases quite a lot. And si pueden silenciar sus micrófonos, por favor. Gracias. And we have lots of different ideas that we have preconceived notions about how to reach happiness. And many of those ideas don't work. And I would like for you to share some of the myths that you have found that get in the way of us feeling happy and fulfilled in our lives.
Yes, so, there are many barriers to happiness, misconceptions, misunderstandings about how to find happiness. And the interesting thing is that sometimes these barriers exist for experts in the field. So even students of positive psychology, even scholars and researchers in the area make these mistakes. And the first one that I'd like to address is one that you referred to in your question, and that is the following. Many people believe that to find happiness, we need to decide that we want to be happy. So if I wake up in the morning and say, I choose happiness, or happiness is important for me, then many believe that is enough, or at least is an important part of finding happiness. But in fact, and this is research done by Iris Moss from San Diego, if we wake up in the morning and say to ourselves, I want to be happy, or happiness is important for me, or happiness is a value for me, we will actually become less happy. In other words, this kind of pursuit of happiness is counterproductive. We become less happy. Now, that is a problem. Why is it a problem? Because we also know at the same time that happiness is valuable. We want to be happy. We want to be happy because we want to feel good. We want to be happy because we want to, we know that being happier makes us more successful and more productive and more creative. and have better relationships and live longer, healthier. So there are all these benefits to happiness. And yet, if I say to myself, I want to be happy, happiness is important for me, I'll actually be less happy. So how do we resolve this issue, this conflict? The answer is that we want to pursue happiness only indirectly. In other words, if we pursue happiness directly, happiness is important for me, I want to attain it, then if we pursue it directly, we'll become less happy. If I pursue it indirectly, then I can actually become happier. And I want to give an analogy, an example of how this actually works. So imagine this. Imagine it's a beautiful sunny day, and you walk outside, and outside the sun is shining. And you look at the sun directly. What will happen to you? You will hurt your eyes. It will be unpleasant. You'll start to tear up. So looking at the sun directly, unhelpful. In fact, it's hurtful. However, what if you go outside, the sun is shining, and you take a prism and you put it so that it breaks the rays of the sun. And on the other side of the prism, what do you get? You get the rainbow, or the colors of the rainbow. And then you look at those, and those you actually can enjoy. They're beautiful, they're pleasant. So looking at the sun directly hurts. Looking at the sun indirectly, that helps. It's the same with happiness. Pursuing happiness directly will hurt us. Pursuing happiness indirectly will actually contribute to our well-being. Now, what does it mean to pursue happiness indirectly? It means taking happiness and breaking it down into its elements, into the metaphorical colors of the rainbow. The question then is, what are these colors of the rainbow? When we break down happiness, what do we get? Well, we get things like a sense of meaning and purpose. We get things like presence and being mindful. We get things like physical exercise. We get things like curiosity. We get things like relationships. So if I get up in the morning and say, I want to be happy, it will make me less happy. But if I say, I'm going to look for more meaning in my life, or I'm going to start meditating regularly, or I'm going to exercise every day or every other day, or I'm going to spend more quality time with the people I care about. These are all indirect ways of pursuing happiness. And doing those things will actually make me happier. So taking happiness, breaking it down into its elements, and then pursuing those elements. That is what will contribute to our happiness. The myth is that directly pursuing happiness contributes to our well-being. The fact is that pursuing happiness indirectly, that is what actually leads to happiness. And again, Arlen, most scholars, most experts in the field of positive psychology, the science of happiness, are not aware of this distinction.
It's such an important distinction, and it reminds me of a quote that I found from Ralph Waldo Emerson, which says, the purpose of life is not to be happy. It is to be useful, to be honorable, to be compassionate, to have it make some difference that you have lived and lived well.
Mm-hmm. And all these things are indirect ways that will lead us to happiness, whether it's being honorable, whether it's finding something that is meaningful, and so on.
And you know, Tal, there is something that I usually share when I, give a conference or when I talk with some audience. And I usually say, we tend to say, I'm going to be happy when I graduate from school. No, I'm going to be really happy when I find a job. And then we say, no, I'm going to be really happy when I have a better paying job. And then we say, no, I'm going to be happy when I find a boyfriend or a girlfriend. And then you say, no, when I get married. And then you are like, no, I'll be really happy when I get divorced. But we go on and on and on. And we really never seem to get to the right place, So this is also something that many of us have internalized, that happiness is a specific destination. And I would like to know, what do you think about that?
Yeah, that's another myth around happiness, Arlene, that is probably the most common myth in the Western world. Because most of us believe that happiness is about arriving, about getting somewhere, about reaching a destination, about getting to the top of the mountain. And unfortunately, this is not the case. The problem, though, is that the opposite is also not the answer to happiness. Because if you think about it, there are two schools of thought around happiness. One school of thought is I call the destination school. When we get to that destination, as you say, have this relationship or buy this house or make this money or get to this position at work, then I'll be happy. When I get to this destination, I'll be happy. We know from a lot of research that that's not the case. So you have the other extreme. You have people who say, it's not about the destination, it's not about the future, it's all about the present. Just learn to be in the here and now, and then you'll be happy. There's a problem with that as well. Not because it's not good to be in the here and now, it's great, but because as human beings, we have a need to achieve. And to achieve means to get to a certain destination, to make progress, to grow, to develop, to conquer. That's also part of human nature. So we have one school that says it's all about the future. We have one school that says it's all about the present. Neither in and of themselves can lead us to happiness. So what do? We synthesize. We bring the two schools together, the two worlds together. How? It's by changing our understanding of the destination, of the goal. Seeing the goal, seeing the destination, not as the end, not as the objective, but rather seeing it as a means towards an end, as part of the journey, in fact. Let me use an analogy to explain it once again. So you go on a road trip, but you don't really know where you're going. So every time you just check, am I going in the right direction? Or maybe I'll fall here off a cliff. I need to be careful. And you're constantly distracted by where you need to get to or where you're going because you're not really sure. But what if you have a very clear sense of where you're going? Oh yeah, I know, I'm going to that mountain peak right there. Once you know where you're going, you're actually a lot more free to enjoy the journey because you have a sense of direction. Now you can let go. Now you can enjoy the process. And if I may give Arlene a personal example. So let's say I decide to write a book and I tell my publisher, I'm going to submit it on July 1, 2024. So that's almost a year from now. That's when I'm going to submit my book. Now I know where I'm going. I know what that mountain is, the direction is for me. Now I can wake up every morning and focus on the present, meaning focus on writing. And I'm more likely to enter a state of flow, which is a state of being present in the here and now. Because I no longer need to, or wait, what am I going to do today? Should I write? Or maybe I should go for a run now. Maybe I can watch a movie, or maybe go on a date. And then I'm distracted and I don't enjoy being in the present. Whereas when I know where I'm going, I know what I'm going to do for the next 6 months, 10 months. I'm going to write every morning for 3 hours, which is what I need to do in order to get there. And during those 3 hours, I'm enjoying the present moment. In other words, it's the end goal, the destination, that liberates me, that frees me to enjoy each step of the way. Without it, there's distraction. There is ambivalence, uncertainty. With it, with that destination, there is a sense of direction and potentially presence, being in the here and now, enjoyment of the journey towards a destination.
Wow, I think that's so important, Tal, because not many of us think of happiness in that way. And oftentimes we also think that happiness is feeling pleasure and feeling content all the time. And we also think many times that happiness cannot coexist with some uncomfortable feelings. And we live a life that, of course, has all this gamma of emotions and situations and happenings that really have an impact on our life experience. So is really happiness all about pleasure and it cannot coexist with other emotions? What do you think?
You know, Arlen, I wish. And I must say, when I started off on this journey towards a happier life, I really believed that one day I will find the secret to the happily ever after. That when I really understand this field, then I'll be able to be happy all the time, experience a constant high, ongoing positive experience. Unfortunately, not realistic, which means that those who believe that or who aspire to that will experience frustration. And that's how it becomes another barrier to happiness. You know, whoever has heard me speak once or twice has probably heard me talk about the idea of the permission to be human, giving ourselves the permission to experience any and all emotions. In fact, most of my lectures that I give, even in organizations, I start by talking about the permission to be human, by talking about how important it is to accept, embrace painful emotions as part and parcel of any life, even a happy life. Accept these emotions rather than reject these emotions. And I want to share a story that I experienced, this was maybe 10 years ago or so. At that time, I was teaching a certificate program, very similar to the one we're teaching today, only this one was held, at least part of it was held, in a place called Kripalu, which is a beautiful retreat place. And Arlen, you have been there a number of times. Beautiful retreat place in Massachusetts, just south of Boston. And I was teaching a year-long certificate program when at the beginning we would meet for 1 week at Kripalu, at that beautiful retreat place. Then we would do online work for 10 months. And then at the end of the online work, we would meet for another week in person. So during one of the groups that we had, during our second meeting, in other words, we'd already worked together for almost a year. During our second meeting at Kripalu, on the third or fourth day, it was a week-long program, we had a session, a question and answer session, where the students would ask me and the other faculty members questions. Now, just to give you a sense, this was in a very large auditorium. There were 200 students, about total of 10 to 15 faculty members, 200 students, and they were asking questions. And at some point, a young woman, she was probably in her mid to late 30s, puts her hand up, and I asked her to ask the question. And that woman was a psychotherapist, a clinical psychologist. She had a very successful practice, and she was an expert, not just in clinical psychology, also in positive psychology. She had studied with Professor Martin Seligman before. Now she was studying with me. And as I mentioned earlier, she'd already been in this course for almost a year. This was the end of it already. And she puts her hand up and she starts to talk. And she says, I'm a clinical psychologist. I have a very successful practice. I have many clients, patients. But sometimes when I sit in front of my clients, my patients, I feel like I'm a fraud. In other words, she was describing the imposter syndrome. And then she stops and she looks down. And a few seconds later, when she looks up again, I see she's crying. And she says, I think to myself, how can I sit in front of my clients and talk to them about happiness, encourage them towards happiness, when I myself sometimes go into these dark places? Now, what are these dark places for her? Being extremely sad or anxious or upset. These are the dark places that she says she sometimes goes into. How can I lead them towards happiness, she asks, if I sometimes go into these dark places? So she continues to cry, and I wait for a few seconds, and then I say to her, do you mind if I ask the rest of the group a question? Now, she's sitting in the second row, and behind her, there are, the 200 plus people. And I said to her, may I ask a question to the rest of the group? And she says, sure. So I asked the following. I say, please put your hand up if over the last 3 months you were in one of those dark places. That's what I asked the rest of the audience. Put your hand up if over the last 3 months you were in one of those dark places. And then I look back at her and I say to her, just look behind you. And she looks behind her and she looks back and she smiles. Why? Because everyone had their hand up. Of course. And I say to her, we all go into these dark places. Remember, we talked about at the beginning, and I talk about over and over again, the permission to be human. We all experience sadness or anxiety or frustration or anger or fear. These are natural human emotions. And then I said to her, I also go into these dark places. You see, my hand was up too, with the other 215 people in the room. And then, remember, she's sitting very close to me, second row. And then I look into her eyes. And suddenly I notice something. And I say to her, you don't believe me, do you? You don't believe me that I also go into these dark places. And she said to me, no, I don't. And this was a very significant moment for me as a teacher, because I realized that so many of she wasn't the only one, that so many of my students who have heard me talk about, just like you, the permission to be human, who've heard me talk about the fact that painful emotions are natural, they don't fully believe me, meaning they say, yeah, permission to be human, painful emotions are natural, until I become a real expert in the field. And when I become a real expert, like my teacher, then I won't any longer experience painful emotions. Then I'll have all the tools and the techniques and the abilities to overcome any and all painful emotions. Not true, not possible. We all, experts and novices alike, experience painful emotions. It's part of life. It's part of every life. It's part of a happy life. And when we don't accept the fact that we sometimes will experience painful emotions, when we don't accept this, we'll experience inevitable frustration, unhappiness. And therefore, this false belief that it's possible to experience basically a straight line, an unbroken chain of pleasure or joy. This belief is a real strong barrier for the experience of real happiness.
Absolutely. And I think that, that story is so powerful, because how many of us think of others in such a different way than we conceive our own experience. And you made me think of another myth that might be going on, and it's related to the use of social media, for example, where we know that we might be on a trip and we will smile to the camera because we're taking a picture, but maybe we're not having the best time in our lives, or maybe we always portray how successful we are, but in reality we experience everything. And social media, in a way, builds, we build stories of what we see, and we create myths about life. What are the realities that other people are, experiencing, and how different that is from my own life. I remember once saying, oh, that couple looks so, so happy, they look so beautiful, they're celebrating. I felt, wow, what a beautiful couple, because I saw the pictures, in Facebook or something. And then I started thinking about my own relationship with, my husband. And then I said, what would happen if I started posting the pictures, because I never post things about, my personal life. What if I started posting some of the pictures that I've taken over the years? And what story would I be reading? And what story would I be reading of those pictures, that people are not posting, or that, like it is kind of a double standard that we create when we compare ourselves to others, or when we see the reality through the lenses of those pictures people use in Facebook, without really understanding the depth of and complexity of life. Because I know comparison is really something that takes life out of many people, when we compare ourselves to others.
Yeah, because on social media, we're not just seeing two-dimensional lives, we're also seeing two-dimensional lives that have been photoshopped. and we're not getting the real picture. Again, we're all in this together. You know, there's suffering and pain and unhappiness, and there is also joy, love, and happiness. And a happy life is one that embraces, accepts any and all emotional experiences.
Thank you so much, Tal. And I would like to continue the conversation by opening the space for questions as well, because maybe some of the people who joined us have their own needs or have specific questions. I know Carlos Acosta has a question, and Tal, you will get the translation as you always do. So, Carlos, adelante, puedes prender tu micrófono y preguntar en inglés o en español, lo que prefieras.
En español, en español. En el ejemplo que está citando el profesor de los distintos colores, evidentemente es una analogía interesante para mostrarnos las distintas maneras concretas e indirectas de acercarnos a la felicidad. Eso me parece súper claro. Quisiera preguntar, ¿qué es la felicidad? O sea, para el caso del ejemplo que estamos hablando, ¿qué es el color? Sería el equivalente de mi pregunta. Porque hay tantas formas de decirlo y me gustaría que el profesor Ben-Shahar nos diera como qué es eso de la felicidad en términos del mismo ejemplo. Muchas gracias.
Good. Thank you for the question, Carlos. So the definition of happiness that we use is one that we didn't invent, we didn't create. It's rather a synthesis of the ideas of the greatest philosophers and psychologists throughout history. It's people like Aristotle and Lao Tzu and Marianne Evans and Helen Keller and Marty Seligman and Sonia Lubomirsky and many others. And when we looked at their ideas and their work on happiness, we came up with five.
Perdón, ¿alguien tiene prendido su micrófono?
We came up with 5 elements of happiness. The first element of happiness, if you will, the first color of the rainbow, is spiritual well-being. Spiritual well-being can of course be about religion, and it can also be about a sense of meaning and purpose that we find at work or at home. But finding meaning and purpose, that's the first element of spiritual well-being. The second one is being present. When we're present, when we're really focused, and it could be on a flower or another person, or being really immersed in the here and now in an experience, we're experiencing spiritual well-being. So purpose and presence, that's spiritual well-being. The second element is physical well-being. Physical well-being is about exercise. Physical well-being is about nutrition, healthy eating. Physical well-being is also about rest and recovery, sleep, for example. So that's physical well-being. And the third element is intellectual well-being. Intellectual well-being is about being curious, asking questions, learning. That doesn't just contribute to happiness, it also contributes to success and even to physical health. So people who ask questions, who are curious, actually live longer. The fourth element of happiness is, in other words, the fourth color of the rainbow, is relational well-being. Relational well-being, well, that's the #1 predictor of happiness. Quality time we spend with people we care about and who care about us. Relational well-being is about kindness and generosity and giving. And finally, emotional well-being. Emotional well-being is about giving ourselves the permission to be human, accepting and embracing painful emotions, as well as generating pleasurable emotions, such as gratitude, such as joy, such as excitement. So these are the 5 elements, the 5 metaphorical colors of the rainbow: spiritual, physical, intellectual, relational, and emotional well-being. In English, these would spell the word spire. Spire, spiritual, physical, intellectual, relational, and emotional well-being. Now, we can't have all these elements all of the time. But what we need to do is focus on some of these elements some of the time. And when we do focus on them, then we're indirectly contributing to our happiness. So if I focus on finding meaning in my work, in my life, I'm becoming happier. If I exercise more, physical well-being, I'll become happier. If I ask more questions, if I spend time with my loved ones, if I express gratitude, these are all indirect ways of pursuing happiness.
Te contestó tu pregunta, Carlos. Y vemos, perfecto. ¿Querías decir algo más?
Bueno, sí. El asunto, sí, lo que pasa es que no siento que me contestó en el sentido de que está expresando los colores, digámoslo así. El verde, el azul, el amarillo, y está bien, no hay ningún problema con eso. Mi pregunta está más de fondo, cuando pregunto, pero entonces, ¿qué son los colores? ¿O qué es el color que para este caso qué es la felicidad?
So what are those actual colors?
No, what he says that basically what's happiness for you? What's your conception of happiness?
Happiness is a life of meaning.
Sí, no estoy hablando ahora de los colores de la felicidad, sino del color como tal. O sea, ¿qué quiere decir qué color? ¿Qué quiere decir felicidad? Sin hablar de las manifestaciones, porque las manifestaciones son la manera como se muestra. Pero más arriba de eso debe haber un concepto esencial. A eso me refiero, perdón.
I think it might have to do with
yes,
totality.
But it's not that helpful. So the essential concept, definition of happiness is that happiness is about whole person well-being. It's about the well-being of the whole person. But that in and of itself is not helpful, because what is the whole person? And this is where I break it down. The whole person is the person's spiritual element. It's the person's physical body. It's the person's intellectual mind. It's the person's interpersonal interactions, relationships. And finally, it's the emotions of the person. So it's whole person well-being. And when we break down the whole person, we get the spire elements.
Thank you,
This
Tal.
definition, Carlos, of whole person well-being comes actually from the work of Helen Keller, who talks about happiness as wholeness.
Thank you, Tal. Alma, por favor, tienes una pregunta. Adelante, por favor.
Sí, buenas tardes, Tal.
Buenas tardes.
Mi pregunta es, el modelo PERMA de Martin Seligman, le añadiríamos, podríamos decir, la dimensión física, prácticamente, porque es muy similar, ¿verdad?
Yes. So the PERMA model comprises 5 elements for those who are not familiar with it. P stands for positive emotion.
Positivas.
E stands for engagement. The R of PERMA stands for relationships. The M of PERMA stands for meaning, and the A stands for accomplishment. So how is it similar and how is it different? So let's start with the P, positive emotion. Positive emotion is part of the SPIRE model under emotional well-being. However, emotional well-being is also about, I would argue first and foremost, about dealing with painful emotions. So this element doesn't exist in PERMA. When you look at engagement, engagement, as I see it, is about being present. Being engaged is being present. So I include it under spiritual well-being. Relationships is, of course, relational well-being. Meaning, that's part of spiritual well-being. And then there is accomplishment. Accomplishment, as I see it, is not one of the colors of the rainbow. It's a derivative of happiness. In other words, if I lead a happy life, I'm more likely to accomplish things. Also, the PERMA model doesn't include intellectual well-being, which I think is extremely important, and physical well-being, which I think is extremely important. Now, does this mean that SPIRE is right and PERMA is wrong? Of course not. This is one model. This is another model. Neither of us received this model from God on Mount Sinai. It's not the ultimate truth. It's a model that we built based on our work and based on other people's work. You know, we always emphasize to our students, if you connect to SPIRE and you think it's the right model for you, teach SPIRE. If you connect more to PERMA, teach PERMA. If you come up with your own model, ALMA, the ALMA model of happiness, teach the ALMA model of happiness.
Muchas gracias. Me encanta ese concepto.
Thank you, Alma. And the important thing is to learn from different people's ideas and thoughts, and then to integrate that learning into your own.
Sí, muchísimas gracias.
Gracias.
Muy enriquecedor. Gracias.
Muchas gracias. Adelante, Luis, por favor. No se escucha. Ok, está bien. León, por favor.
Hola. Ok, mira, yo soy médico y también la definición de salud, pues no es que los órganos funcionen bien, es el equilibrio biopsicosocial. Sí, entonces de la misma manera todos los elementos se tienen que conjuntar, ¿no? A mí me encanta porque esto que tú hablas, bueno, lo viene uno leyendo en el budismo, lo viene uno viendo con Thich Nhat Hanh y la meditación y todo esto. Y a final de cuentas es obtener armas que nos permitan manejar las situaciones difíciles para que no nos tumbe una situación difícil, ¿no? Dice Chopra, si tu felicidad depende de algo, es solo otra forma de miseria, ¿no? O sea, tiene que venir de adentro tu adaptación y tu fortalecimiento. Y me encanta porque yo he conocido el PERMA últimamente, pero este que mencionas ahorita tiene cosas adicionales y muchas gracias, está muy interesante.
Gracias, León.
Thank you, doctor. And you know, it's so important for doctors and nurses and people from the medical profession to introduce these ideas into their practices, because we know that mind and body are connected, and that if I can experience more pleasurable emotions, my immune system will also be stronger. Just as we know that if I experience more stress, my immune system will weaken. And if you think about it, I mean, what does medicine do? Medicine helps our natural healer to do its work. So if I break my hand, yeah, we'll put it in a cast, but the cast doesn't heal me. I heal myself. The cast just enables the internal healer to do its work. Ultimately, it's about us, whether it's developing the antibodies or building new cells. And in order to help our bodies do their work, our emotional experience, our psychological well-being matters a lot. So creating a gap or breaking mind from body, that's unhealthy. It's unhealthy for the mind, it's unhealthy for the body.
And I think Leon is right, because every time you teach and every time you write a book, you encompass the wisdom from the East and from the West and from, you know, many different, as you mentioned before, many different sources. So I think he captured that profoundly and very well, Leon. Thank you.
Thank you, Doctor.
Luis, por favor, a ver si ya funciona.
A ver, ¿qué tal ya?
Sí, perfecto.
Está.
Yes.
A ver si me sale en inglés.
Perfecto.
Well, it's been a pleasure to be here. I would like to ask about this part. Suena doble?
Te oímos bien.
Ah, okay, perdón. This part about living in the present, but also looking towards the future. Some years ago, I stumbled upon Buddhism, and I loved it. It brought me so much peace. But then I stumbled upon Viktor Frankl, and I realized that, of course, you need meaning and achievement, because then, if not, you feel kind of hollow, even if you have peace. But being 25 years old and maybe speaking on behalf of my generation, lives become so liquid, so changing, and the pace is going faster and faster. I realized that having a plan 15 years into the future is not realistic. Like, it's not going to happen. It's going to change something in my life. So how far towards the future should you plan? So far, I've settled on about 5 years, but I don't know if there's like an optimal amount of time that you should look forward into time.
Yeah. So you're right, Luis, that times have changed. And in the past, 15 years or 10 years would have been reasonable. Less so today, because who knows what the world is going to look like in 5 years, in 2 years, because everything has become so much faster and the change has become so much more, so much bigger. Now with artificial intelligence, of course, playing a role. Who knows what the world is going to look like in 5 years? So it's more difficult to set long-term goals. But here is the thing, Luis. We still should set them. Again, it doesn't have to be for 10 years. It can even be for 2 years. But we need to set those goals. Because it doesn't matter if we change our goals halfway there. Meaning, let's say I set a 2-year goal, and after 6 months, I change my mind and I want to look, elsewhere. There's no problem with that. Because the key is not achieving those goals. The key is having those goals. And if I have a 2-year goal and for 6 months, I'm able to be present, liberated, free, as I pursue that goal. And then after 6 months, I actually change this goal. It's no longer this mountain, it's that mountain. So what? Then I pursue that for the next 2 years or 6 months. So the key is having the goal, less so getting to that goal. So if I have a goal for 2 years or 6 months or 10 years, that doesn't matter as much as having the goal at any given point or most of the time.
Yeah, so it makes me think of, I think it was Eisenhower who said it, that plans are nothing, planning is everything. This is that kind of the gist of
Nice.
it.
I like that. I didn't know this quote, but it fits perfectly.
All right, thank you so much.
Muchas gracias, Luis. We have 3 more people, but I don't know, Tal, about time. I know it's very late for you, so let me know if...
So let's take one more person and then we can
begin to close perfectly.
Yes.
Brenda, por favor.
Muchas gracias. Muchas gracias por la plática. La verdad es que a mí me encantan todos estos temas. He hecho estudios al respecto. Me gusta mucho la psicología positiva y algo que me gustó mucho fue el libro de Happiness, justamente, ¿no? Que lo leí y a veces retomo cosas, pero creo que algo que nos sirve mucho a los seres humanos es también el vernos reflejados y aprender con el ejemplo de los demás. Nos es más fácil tal vez a veces interpretar conceptos, ¿no? Poderlos entender mejor y aplicarlos a nuestra propia vida. Y creo que en el libro el hecho de acercarnos más a la vida que ha llevado y de cómo ha aplicado estos conceptos de psicología positiva a mí me hizo comprender muchísimo mejor. Y algo que decía Luis y que decían también hace un momento es que solemos estar viviendo o en el pasado y en la ansiedad o en el futuro y también el estrés que nos genera el futuro. Entonces, algo que a mí me ha servido particularmente por haber, por ejemplo, empezado a emprender, tenía yo una carrera científica de 12 años y a los 38 años dije, ya no quiero esto, ahora quiero otro, pero para poder solventar ese espacio que me permitía a mí tener un ahorro suficiente para poderme salir, fue convertir ese chip mental de decir, ok, esto es un apalancador o un propulsor para llegar a aquella otra meta. Entonces eso me hizo no sentirme tan frustrada mientras pasaba ese tiempo y después lograr seguirme poniendo metas. Entonces es un poco como de vivir cómo me quiero ver en un futuro, pero hacerlo en el presente. Entonces eso creo que es una forma más fácil de alcanzar las metas, mantenernos motivados, mantenernos retadores también, que ahí entra mucho lo del el concepto del estado de flow, y decir, conocer nuestras propias habilidades y entonces poder llevar a la práctica todo lo que personas han trabajado y nos han acercado con estas herramientas y que al final encontrar en una persona, en una deidad, en un concepto, lo que para nosotros construimos como el concepto de felicidad, nos permiten vivir en un estado mucho más empático, más resiliente y pues al final tener mejores relaciones con uno mismo y con los demás, ¿no?
Muchas gracias, Brenda.
Yeah. You know, all these things that you describe contribute to us making the most of the journey. So yes, have a challenging goal. And again, going back to Luis, whether it's 2 years from now or 6 months from now, have a challenging goal. And then, as part of the journey, use our strengths as much as possible. See where we can experience flow. Engage day to day in meaningful activities. These are all ways to contribute to our journey being a happy one. For that, we need the end goal to set us free, and we want to add all these elements that we learn about through the science of happiness to improve our experience of the present moment. Because all we have is the present moment, nothing else.
Thank you so much, Tal. And I would like to show a video of how to enjoy the present moment. Tal has created a beautiful, beautiful program, and I would like to share this with you. And then you can ask any questions you might have about it.
Here's a simple truth that can change your life. You can become happier.
Hi, my name is Tal Ben-Shahar.
Professor Tal Ben-Shahar.
Dr. Tal Ben-Shahar teaches what's known around campus as the happy class. It's the most popular class here at Harvard.
The lecturer of that course, Tal Ben-Shahar.
Tal Ben-Shahar.
Tal Ben-Shahar.
I would like to invite you to join me on a journey that explores the field of happiness from both theoretical and practical perspectives. By embarking on this online interdisciplinary program and being exposed to evidence-based tools and techniques that have been tried and tested through rigorous research, you will learn to enhance your own happiness as well as others.
Thank you for being those who really change the world.
You could listen to it. Was it right? Was it shared correctly, Tal? So yeah, so I would really like for you to share, you know, why did you create this program? I'm part of it. I have seen the stories that, you know, people share. Some of the students say, you know, their life has been changed in so many aspects. Some of them talk about, you know, my prior life and my life after the certificate program, and of course, after the Master's in Happiness Studies. So why don't you share with us what is the purpose of this program and some of the highlights, and then I can add as well, please, Tal.
You know, Arlen, so the purpose of this program is very simple. It's to help participants become happier and to help them help others become happier. We're about spreading happiness. Why? As I mentioned earlier, because happiness is good in and of itself, as an end in itself. And in addition, if you increase levels of happiness, you become more productive, more creative, more innovative, healthier. You enjoy better relationships. You actually become kinder, more generous. So it contributes to a healthier, happier, and better world. That's why we created this program. This is why we do what we do.
Yeah, so the program is beautiful. It's a year-long program. It's very profound, and it's divided in 2 different semesters where you learn about all the you know, theories and theoretical aspects of how to build happiness and the benefits and many of the theories behind Tal's model of SPIRE. And then the second semester is about application, and it shares many important tools both for your own well-being and for you to share these tools at work, or if you're a teacher, a doctor, a coach, a psychologist. And the certificate program is also part of the Master's in Happiness Studies, which is the first Master's in Happiness Studies in the world. And if you go through the certificate program, you can apply both the learning and also, you know, the payment that you did to the certificate program goes actually also in favor of the master's program. So the certificate program is beginning in October, and we have a special discount for all of you who joined today. and it will be wonderful. I know some of the students are also here, but it would be a pleasure for us to have you as part of the community. The community has people from how many countries, Tal? We have represented in the
89 countries as of today.
89 countries, and it's fully translated to Spanish. And as part of the community, you also get access to a wonderful student and alumni club that has many different activities, and we have gatherings in person, and you have also webinars, live webinars with Tal and with me, plus a lot of all the lectures that are pre-recorded. So please write to us if you have any questions and you would like to join. You're just in time to do so. So, well, I want to thank, I don't know if you have any questions. Is there another question related to this final information that we shared right now? No questions. So I would really like to thank all of you. Muchas gracias a todos por conectarse, por ser parte de este webinar. And thank you so much, Tal, for always bringing so many interesting concepts, ideas, and helping us build a philosophy of life. I really cherish you and the teachings that you've shared with me and with the community. And I really appreciate your presence here tonight.
Well, thank you, Arlen, and thank you for all that you're doing to spread happiness in Mexico and around the world.
Thank you so much.
Gracias. Thank you. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Pleasure. Thank you.
Hasta luego. Bye, Marta, Luis, Alicia. Mucho gusto en verlos. Hasta luego, Rosario. Bye.